Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Publisher's Chair. And settle in because today we're going to explore the remarkable career journey of David Marlin. From his early days at Columbia to his pivotal role in founding MetaComet, David has been at the forefront of shaping the technological landscape within the publishing world. He's built a career on transforming complex financial processes into streamlined solutions, and in doing so, has left an indelible mark on how creators and businesses manage their intellectual property. So, pull up a chair and let's get to know the mind behind MetaComet. David, thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, Angus, for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, thank you very much. So let's start with our first question. David, you spent years as a technology consultant for some of the biggest names in publishing, Random House, Penguin, HarperCollins. And before you even conceived of Metacomet, what was that moment, that specific challenge or reoccurring frustration you observed in the industry that made you think, right, I've had enough, I'm going to build a solution myself? And can you paint a picture of the operational landscape that you're witnessing before you stepped in to innovate?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So I founded Metacomet really I started in 1999 with a partner, and we became an official company in 2000. Um, and back then, the technology landscape in publishing was like the Wild West. It was there were just like these cowboy coders like me who would just go into places and write custom systems or modify existing systems. I mean, that's what my role was back then. I got really fortunate. I had a business degree and I have been doing marketing, but really I love the technology side of things. And so I was doing work with all these really cool companies. And at the time, the dominant publishing system was this system called Vista. Some of your listeners will perhaps remember what Vista was. Now it's, I think, part of Ingenta. They dominated the publishing landscape for publishing software. Clopatec was also around at that point, and that was pretty much, and then there was a system called Syspub. There were some smaller systems. But these were all like these kind of all-in-one solutions. And there was nothing dedicated to the royalty problem. And so one of my customers, it was a company called eReads. It was a literary agent named Richard Curtis. He had the incredible foresight. He's one of the founding fathers, I would say, of ebooks. He had this incredible foresight in the 90s he had represented hundreds, if not thousands, of authors, many well-known best-selling authors, and he had the foresight to go to all of them and say, "Hey, can I please have your digital rights?" And at that point, the concept of digital rights was foreign to most people. It was not in contracts at all. So there were no digital rights between authors and publishers because it just wasn't in the contracts. So Richard had this incredible idea of just getting everybody's digital rights before the rest of the world caught on to this. And so all these classics, just he got all the digital rights to them. And back then, the ebook world was very fledgling. There were most of the companies that existed back then uh, don't exist anymore, or are in a very different form. But it was small but growing. And Richard, he had been a literary agent, and all of a sudden he had this royalty problem because he had, I don't know, maybe hundreds, if not 1,000 or so authors who were generating not a ton, but revenue off of these original ebook readers. Like there was one called the Rocket Book, there was one called Peanut Peanut Press, I think it was, and Palm Digital, and all these old ebook readers. And he had all of a sudden pay out royalties every quarter. And so he had been a customer of mine. I had come in and done a lot of custom development work for him on some systems he had. And he asked me if I could build him a royalty system. And I said, sure, that'll be $15,000. I just threw a number out there. I just thought that seems like a lot of money, right? And then little did I know, I probably ended up getting paid about 10 cents an hour by the time I was done writing the first iteration, and it didn't, it still required my hand holding and babysitting. But he and I went into business together because there just were no dedicated royalty systems out there. And so he and I went in, decided to form a partnership and go into business together and try and sell this to other publishers. And that was the beginning of MetaComet and how we got into this. And just an interesting kind of aside is it was kind of sad about I don't know, about 16, 17 years ago, Richard sold the business. And so we lost our original customer. We no longer had eReads as a customer. Um, but then about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the company that bought eReads started working with us. So we got our original customer, eReads, back, which was kind of fun. So, anyways, that's how I get started in this.
Thank you. I mean, it's fascinating. It's crazy to think that you'd have such an open landscape where it's basically just two of you guys.
Yeah, yeah,
It's brilliant.
it was very different back then.
The Wild West.
The
Yeah.
Wild West. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So moving on to our next question. Metacomet's philosophy revolves around making lives better by solving painful problems, as you say. So when you're sitting down with a potential client, what's the most common story they tell you about their old process? And have you got any kind of memorable anecdotes that highlights what your software brings to their daily operations?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I definitely have some anecdotes. So every publisher we work with has really one or more of four problems. The process is time consuming. It just takes a lot of time to manage royalties. Even if you have an automated system, a lot of them just, aren't really designed to provide the level of automation that really, that gets you to the point where you don't have to put a lot of manual effort in. Um, and that ends up, and then there's the uncertainty when there's manual processes involved, or even with some of these royalty systems out there, there's just oftentimes uncertainty about the accuracy of the results. Like, how do you really know it's calculating everything correctly? And so there's that element of it. And then together between being time consuming and that uncertainty, it creates a high stress situation. So like here in the States, April 15th is tax time. And for like from like February to April 15th, everybody's stressing out like, oh, taxes are coming up, taxes are coming up. And it's like that with royalties, every royalty period. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna have to deal with the royalties again. And um, so really and then a thing related to that is growth. So a lot of the companies we work with are high growth companies, and they some really forward-looking publishers that we work with that the first system they got was a royalty system because they knew that was going to be such a drag on their operations that they just didn't want to have to deal. They didn't want royalty slowing them be the thing that slows them down. So just in summary, it's time consuming, it's risky because you don't know the results are right. And therefore it's very stressful and also it can hinder growth. So companies come to us for one of those reasons. So in terms of some stories, some highlights. So there's a couple that really stand out. So this one small publisher, it was actually a couple of women who started this business. They had grown way faster than they anticipated, which is great, a really cool success story. But the founder, and they were doing a thing that a lot of publishers sometimes like to do to be author friendly, which is pay royalties out monthly. Um, and it had become her full-time job. She could do nothing but pay out royalties. It's just two or three of them in this business. They had just grown beyond their I mean, I'm sure they had dreamed of that kind of growth, but it's very unusual to achieve that kind of growth. I mean, they had hundreds, if not over 1,000 books. They're paying royalties monthly, and it was a full-time job. And I remember when we spoke to them, the woman doing it, she was in tears. She was like, "My life is awful. I got into publishing because I love getting books out to people. I love working with authors, and I'm spending my whole life stressing out about royalties." And so we started working with her, and within a couple months, she was spending just like a couple days a month doing royalties. So it went from a full-time job to a couple days a month. There's a lot of stories. That's an extreme story. There's some other pretty close ones. We have customers. I can think of one customer. I still remember this conversation. I was visiting them in Colorado Springs, beautiful background. We were eating lunch at this fancy golf course with these huge, like floor to ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. And it was a happy moment because they had been up and running with us. And she had told us that they paid royalties twice a year, so every 6 months. It took 4 months out of every 6 months for her to pay royalties, and they would all have to bring in other people to help her with it too. So two-thirds of her work, and she was supposed to be the executive assistant to the CEO. Like she was supposed to be doing much higher level stuff. And After getting up and running with us, it would take them less than 2 weeks every 6 months to do. So that's another example. Now, those are kind of like happy ending stories. They're all happy ending stories, but here's a different kind of nightmarish story. Um, we've worked with a few customers with this story, so I'll kind of tell it generically. So when you set up our system, we have this really standardized process to get you up and running quick and easy. Um, and the kind of last step is we do these things called parallel runs. So we take all your data, we run sales from a prior period. We look at the results and you compare that to what you did and you assess how accurate things are. And that tells you if you're ready to go live or not. And we had this has happened a few times, but so I'll in my mind pick on one of them. This one customer, we did the parallel run. I think they were doing quarterly royalties, and none of the results matched. And when that happens, there's always the initial think, well, MetaComet must be making a mistake, but that almost never happens. Um, and so they're like, holy cow, we made all the mistakes. And so they said, you know what, let's go back and do 2 periods ago. So we went back into 2 periods ago. None of their statements were right from 2 periods ago. So then they said, okay, let's do 2 years. None of their statements were right. And it's not like a lot of times authors think, well, my publisher's ripping me off. These guys were really trying to be honest. That's why they came to us. And half of the time they were overpaying the authors. So it wasn't they were just underpaying authors. Half the time they were underpaying authors. Half the time they were overpaying authors. So it kind of came out in the wash for them. But some authors were getting ripped off and some were getting this extra bonus. And they were like, oh my God, what do we do? We've never paid out royalties correctly. So I don't remember how they solved that problem. But I do know going forward, I think what they ended up deciding to do is just be quiet. Because what are you going to do? Like in a situation like that, if you can't ask authors you've overpaid to give you money back.
Mm,
And if you tell authors you underpaid, what do you do in that? I mean, and in both situations, the authors are going to stop trusting you. They're like, oh my God, these guys, how do I know they're ever going to get it right?
mm.
So I'm not sure what they ended up doing. I should find out what the end of that part of the story was. But those are some memorable situations that we've been in. Yeah,
Gosh, I can't believe that. So not only did you have someone who was in tears because of their royalties situation,
tears,
yeah,
tears.
but I guess also people pulling their hair out on all ends of the spectrum. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
wow. But hey, you've solved them. So you
yeah.
solved their
We
problems.
solved it.
So painful problems isn't just a quotation there. It's actual, I'll say.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, thanks, David. So I'll go on to my next question, and this is more about cybersecurity. So you're on record as a regular speaker in cybersecurity and publishing. MetaComet is SOC 2 Type 2 certified. And in an increasingly digital world, and considering the sensitive financial data that you handle, what's the most infamous attempt at a data breach or security compromise that you've either personally encountered or just heard about in the industry? And at a slightly more serious note, knowing you're safeguarding millions of pounds in creative income, how do you switch off at the end of the day?
That's a great question, Angus. So I'll tell you the first story. This is something that happened to me. We like to, on a regular basis, go visit customers. We have a lot of customers in the EU. So our COO, Khalid, and I, several years ago, this must have been like 6, 7 years ago, we went to Europe and just did this tour of several different countries. Like we were in the Netherlands, France, Spain, just visiting customers. And, we were taking trains and planes and going everywhere. And, a lot of the trips, like on the trains, you're sitting on a train for 3 or 4 hours, great time to get work done. And I remember, I don't remember how we know it was this train, but there was a train going from Amsterdam in the Netherlands to this town called Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And it was like a 3 hour train ride, and they had Wi-Fi on the train. So Khalid and I both hook into the Wi-Fi on the train. Everything, fine. We're getting work done. Um, Several months later, we come home and out of the blue, I get an email from our controller saying, no, I don't get it. I get an email from our controller saying, no, no, that's not. She came into my office and said,
Mm,
so just that $50,000 wire transfer you and I have been working on, the bank has some concerns about it. So I just want to talk that through before we do it. I'm like, what are you talking about? What $50,000 wire transfer? So it turns out that on that train ride, someone had intercepted our our signal because it wasn't
mm,
encrypted, and they stole our credentials to get into our Microsoft Office 365 account, and they set it up brilliantly. What they did was they set it up so any email going from my controller to me would get redirected to them. So I wouldn't get it. They would get it instead. And then they would, if it seemed like I should get it, like something like to keep the suspicion down,
yeah.
they would then resend it to me from her. Um, and any email I sent to her, they did the same thing. So they had it, so they had hacked into our account. They were in our account. They could do anything they wanted in our account. So they set up these filters. And it turns out they had convinced her that with these emails from me, from my legitimate email account,
Mm,
that we were going to send out this $50,000 wire transfer. She would get responses from me, legitimate email responses saying, yeah, go ahead, do it, make it happen. Because these guys had stolen through the Wi-Fi our credentials to get into our email system. And we were this close. And at that time, I mean, getting hacked for $50,000 would suck anytime, pardon my
mm,
language. But uh, it would have been devastating. It would have been really brutal. I mean, we would have survived, but it would have been awful. And Fortunately, the bank had some controls in place where for a wire of that size, I had to go in and sign it manually or something like that.
mm,
So fortunately, it didn't go through. But that was frightening how close they got. So there's an example of
mm,
where I don't know if it's infamous because not that many people know about it, but within MetaComet, and
mm,
all the webinars I've given on security, everyone knows that story. So the second part of your question is how do I manage to switch off at the end of the day? So I started giving all these webinars about cybersecurity because we made, so that was kind of one sort of nail in the coffin. I don't know if that's the right analogy, but I was just like, how do we know that we're secure as a company? I mean, there's so many things you can and should be doing. I mean, there's so many things. There's technology things, there's people things, there's just so many elements to security, and it just seems so overwhelming. And I just felt so, as a company, vulnerable. And like, if you go ask a company that doesn't have a certification, are you guys secure? Of course, they're gonna say yes, and they say our servers are encrypted, and we host at AWS, so we have the best security in the world. And that's true. I mean, AWS, Microsoft, they all have like the best security in the world. But that doesn't mean you're secure. In fact, it has very little to do with how secure you are. And in fact, technology issues like we experienced with that Wi-Fi hack, those are less of an issue than the social engineering issues where someone tricks you to click on a link that then makes your whole system vulnerable, and they can
Mm.
hack into your system, and ransomware, and that's how all that stuff starts. So we made the decision to follow a framework. It's like we don't know what we're doing. I mean, yeah, we got antivirus, we got, secure servers and all that stuff, but really, we wanted to follow a framework. And here in North America, the standard framework for security is this thing called SOC 2 Type 2. So the association of it's called the AICPA, the Association of Accountants in the United States, basically have developed this standard for becoming secure. SOC 2 Type 1 means that you have the policies in place. SOC 2 Type 2 means that you have a third-party independent auditor coming in to make sure you're following those policies. So we skipped the Type 1 and we just went to Type 2. So, because if you have Type 2, you've got the policies in place and they're validating. So it was a big lift. Let me tell you, it was a lot more. And I led it from our side. People in the company were like, "What are you doing?" A lot of people thought I was nuts. But I just felt like I wanted to be able to go to bed at night. I wanted to be able to switch off at the end of the day because
Mm.
I was always nervous about this stuff. And so I became somewhat of an expert on security because I had to, because I was basically the project manager for the security project for MetaComet. And and that's how we did it. And I mean, like, we have, I think it's 20 security policies. And then those policies dictate close to 100 what are called controls, like things that you can monitor to see whether you're being secure or not. And we actually have this system, this really cool automated system. It's called Vanta, that monitors 90% of that. Like, it tells, are we following this policy? Are we following that policy and these other policies? It creates controls for the policies and then makes sure we're following them all. Every day, we now have a security officer, but every day she goes in and she can see, okay, we're 99% secure. Why aren't we 100% secure? Because we just hired a new person and they haven't gone through security training yet. So as soon as they go through security training, we'll be 100% secure. So um, and related to that, we became GDPR compliant because if you're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, you're like 75% of the way to becoming GDPR compliant. So we decided let's just do that. Europe and the rest of the world has a similar framework. It's called ISO 27001, that a lot of companies have. So if you're working with a company that's got ISO 27001 or SOC 2 Type 2, you know that they're being audited externally to be sure they're following all these best practices. So there's no guarantee you're not going to get hacked. And in fact, so many of the hacks you hear about are companies that were SOC 2 Type 2 certified, but at least you know you're doing everything reasonably possible, which is way more than what a company that doesn't have that certification is doing. You're doing everything reasonably possible to protect yourself and your company. And you can do more than that too. Like we just signed up for this recently, this tool called Microsoft Defender. So we're like a Microsoft. Our software is all open source, but all our tools internally we use Microsoft for. And they have this cool security system called Defender. And one of the things it does is it'll send out like fake phishing emails to your employees to
Hmm.
see if they're following, if we've done a good job training them on how to identify phishing emails. And then if they fail, they have to go through extra training. Everyone has to go through security training every year as part of this one of our policies. Um, and so this just tracks because that's honestly like probably the biggest vulnerability is phishing and spammy emails
Hmm.
coming in. Um, and fortunately, last time we sent it out, everyone passed. But yeah, so that's that. So it's that compliance that gives me that peace of mind to switch off.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. And actually, it was your own experience with a lack of security that and a scare that gave you that compliance that gives you that security.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I'm really scared of ransomware too. I mean,
Mm.
um, we have one customer before, so uh, I don't know that they had a ransomware attack, but I'm guessing it was. They have kept confidential the nature of it, but they had all their stuff stored on internal servers, and we had been in conversations with them, and one day they were like, we need a new royalty system in 2 weeks. Our royalties are due. They had like 10,000 titles due, royalties due. Not all of them were due in 2 weeks, but a huge chunk of them. We were already familiar with them because we've been talking to them for a little while. But they told us they couldn't access any of their servers. And their last backup they thought they were doing nightly backups from their old royalty system. Their last backup was from 7 years ago. And they needed royalties to go out the door in 2 weeks. And
Mm.
amazingly, we got them uh, out the door for it was that initial 1,000, and then the other like 10,000 titles. They had like 2 months to get those out the door. Um, so yeah, it's there's some scary stuff out there.
Mm. Well, I'll make sure to mind if the expert on cybersecurity tells me to watch out for ransomware, I definitely will. Well, thank you. We'll go on to fourth question here, which is kind of touching again on your experience. And you've co-authored numerous pieces. So if you had to distill all of the accumulated wisdom that you have from all your experience in publishing and royalties into a single unconventional piece of advice, say for a struggling author or a small publisher trying to navigate the complexities of financial management, what would it be? I mean, I guess something beyond read your contract. So maybe a clever hack or something counterintuitive that you learned.
Um, there's this one. So this isn't specific to publishing. This is more generalized towards just doing business and having relationships with people that you rely on. And it's a phrase I first heard about a year ago, which has really resonated with me. And so, like, if I could distill, I don't know if I'd call it wisdom, but what I've learned over, I guess it is wisdom, but what I've learned over the years, one of the most important kind of concepts is what you tolerate, you endorse. What you tolerate, you endorse.
Hmm.
So if you have a relationship, so say a publisher has a relationship with an author and they need that author to hit certain deadlines, and they're not hitting those deadlines, but for whatever reason they're afraid or they're nervous about giving the author feedback, uh, you're endorsing that laissez-faire attitude. you're telling the author or that whoever you have that relationship with that, you know what, it's okay if I'm late. They never complain, right? They never complain.
Mm,
A more practical kind of story is, in our office complex, there's our bathrooms are shared by multiple offices. And for a while it was a unisex bathroom and somebody kept leaving the seat up and no one did anything about it and the women were complaining about it, understandably. And we finally, but no one did anything about it. No one put up a sign. No one,
mm,
and so whoever was doing that, they're like, oh, nobody cares. It's not like they were doing something maliciously bad, but just something as simple as that. So finally, we put up signs. We finally figured out who was doing it, and we asked them to stop, and it stopped. So it's like, uh, so it's kind of any aspect of a relationship. It's just this thing that it's really become a guiding principle of mine, I guess. Like another example is if your people, at your publishing house are sending out emails with typos in it, and you're letting that typo, you're maybe CC'd on it, or you see the email and you don't say anything about that typo, you're endorsing in their head um, uh, that, oh, you know what? It's okay that I don't double check my work. It's okay that but if you're committed to excellence, you can't let that go. You have to call that out because otherwise you're endorsing it and you have to insist on them doing a better job. Another publishing example is in the right side of the business. A lot of foreign publishers, they don't, they license some content for translation, um, republication, and they don't send royalty statements or payments. It might not even be malicious, but if you're not following up with them, you're saying, oh, they don't really care. It's all right. Well, let's just push this back a month. Let's push it back another month because you're tolerating it. And so they're in their head justifying it. So I would say that would be the latest piece of wisdom that's jostling around in my head that I would share with
mm.
people is what you tolerate, you endorse.
Yeah, which is great. Which is great advice, I think, not just for business, but life in general.
Yeah.
So
I found it so, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Oh, thank you, David. But in a similar vein of advice, um, you've been a MetaComet since what, 1999, 2000. You've had 2 decades now of experience in publishing technology business. So aside from what you tolerate and you endorse, what would be the concise piece of advice that you yourself would give to David Marlin of 1999? Um, what would that message be?
Um, oh man, I think I have to pick a couple things.
Hmm.
One would probably be don't do it. Like I had no idea, honestly. I had no idea what I was doing back in 2000. And I made so many freaking mistakes that I mean, I'm one of those believers that you have to make mistakes to grow. I just don't see how else you grow. You have to learn from your mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, you're just not going to learn. So you got to make mistakes. But I made just some fundamental blunders. And it cost me in those early days. Those early days were tough. Um, so I guess it would be don't do it, but if you are going to do it, maybe learn a few things first. I think one of the things would be do it bigger because, I mentioned earlier that it was like the Wild West of kind of technology in the publishing industry. And this company, Vista, was just, I mean, they had done amazing things and they own the industry. Um, and but they weren't innovating and changing uh, And I think there was really a big opportunity there. And so rather than the 20-year ramp up it took to get to the point where we are, I think it would have been worth um, going for it more, like trying to raise some money. Like we were totally self-funded. Um, and then I think related to that is you got to be patient. Um, like don't worry if it takes a long time. Like running a business is a slog. It's just a long process with lots of ups and downs. Another piece of advice I would have given myself was like, you hear people talk about imposter syndrome. And in those early days, I felt like such an imposter. Like I would show up to meetings and I'd be like, I don't, what right do I have to be sitting in on this meeting telling these publishers how to do royalties?
Mm,
Uh, but the reality is, I still, as little as I may have known, I still knew way better than them. And but you don't even have to have that attitude. You just have to have the attitude like I'm here to help them solve a problem. Just listen and really be genuine in helping them try to solve the problem. But I really did in the early days suffer, and I still do. I mean, I think a lot of us do suffer from like, do I really belong here? And then I think the last piece of advice I would give myself is don't sell your Berkshire Hathaway stock in 2000. I don't know if you're familiar with Berkshire Hathaway, but it's like Warren Buffett stock, and it's one of the best performing stocks over a long stretch of time. And I remember I needed some cash, so I sold my Berkshire Hathaway stock. I would have been in much better shape if I never. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself 25 years ago.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, really, really good advice. Not just to yourself, but also to us. So thank you. Apart from Berkshire Hathaway, I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, well, and then that's it. There you have it, David. Thank you so much for your insights, your advice, your anecdotes. It's been really brilliant to hear them and take a peek behind the curtain of not only your career, but also the mind of David Marlin himself. So thank you very much. It's been an absolute
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you so much, Angus. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This was a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right.
Thanks.